You never give up on me. You never give up on me. Oh, Jesus is running to me, running to me. Oh, Jesus is coming for me, coming for me. Oh, my Savior is calling my name, calling me free. Jesus will never give up on me, never give up on me. Never give up on
You're the horizon, they're bright. The glimmer that breaks the constant night. You are the brilliance, the dream, evidence of things unseen. And even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light. All of the time and space could not contain. You are the everlasting light. You are the glory that stays. You never dim, you never fail. And you are the power, the truth. And nothing can stop you, and nothing can stop you. Even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light. All of the time and space could not contain. You are the everlasting light. Even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light. All of the time and space could not contain. You are the everlasting light.
The end and the beginning, the new reality outside my understanding, but still within my reach. As far as I can see you, you're closer still to me. You are the everlasting light. The end and the beginning, new reality outside my understanding, still within my reach. As far as I can see you, you're closer still to me. You are the everlasting light. Yeah. Even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light. You are told. Time and space could not contain you. You are the everlasting light. Even the darkest days are temporary. You are the everlasting light. All of the time and space could not contain. You are the everlasting light.
Bring it all to peace. Storm surrounding me, let it break. Let your name still. Call the sea is still. The raging need is still. Every wave. Let your name, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. Call these bones to live. Call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. Your name is light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear, Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Your name is light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mosaic. It's so good to see you. My name is Joe. I'm one of our pastors here, and I love that we get to be a part of church together every single week. I've been here for about 13 years now. Met my wife here. We had our 3 kids here, Isaiah, Indigo, River. We even have a 4th on the way. Baby girl, we can't wait to meet you. And I just love this community. And it's an honor that we get to every week come together and have conversations about life. So we just want you to know you're a part of our tribe wherever you are around the world. And today is going to be a really special day. See, we've started a new series called The Genius of Jesus. And it's all connected to Pastor Erwin's newest book that just came out. And so first, I want to invite you, if you have yet to get your copy, go buy it right now. Go to thegeniusof.com or wherever you buy your books. Pick up your copy because this is such an incredible message about how we can unlock our own genius as we connect to the greatest genius who ever lived. And then with the book, once you have that copy, here's what I want you to do next. I want you to join a book club, or I want you to host a book club. See, right now we have people all around the world who are opening up their homes, who are inviting friends, family, coworkers to do a book club together and to dive deeper into the material. And so if you want to host a book club wherever you live, you can go to mosaic.org/bookclubs. And on that site, there's going to be materials and resources that we made available to you. Pastor Erwin himself has recorded to help you as you launch your book club and you connect your friends with this material. So if you want to host a book club, you want to join a book club, go to mosaic.org/bookclubs. And I can't wait to hear all the conversations and all the life change that happens as we dive into the genius of Jesus. And also in connection with the book, we have made available to you some special limited edition Genius of Jesus merch. So if you want to be a part of picking up some of your merch, you want to grab a hoodie, grab a shirt, some of this in really unique and cool pieces, then you can go to thegeniusof.com and make sure to get yours now because they are going fast, so do not wait. See, one of my favorite things about Mosaic is we have a reputation as one of the most generous communities in the world because there's people like you. I know there's hundreds, there's thousands of you around the world that give above and beyond, that you give of your tithes and your offerings to Mosaic because you believe that you find your life and you give it away. And so first, I just want to say thank you if that's you. If you have chosen to commit and be sacrificial here, why we do this is because it's always about people. And when I'm reminded of that, I think about even this moment with new friends that I met a couple weeks ago. And at the end of the gathering, they came up to me and they were engaged and they're both in tears. And one of them comes and she says, I haven't been in church in almost a decade. And I was terrified to walk through these doors. But we're on our way to Target and we saw Mosaic and we saw that it was a church. And so for 3 weeks, we've been debating whether we should come, and finally we came today. And she just is crying about how much her soul needed this. And then her fiance starts sharing about the fact the only reason he came was because of her. He does not believe in God. He's not interested in Jesus, but he loves his fiance. And he says, just over the course of the gathering, from meeting everybody in church and then the worship and the music and then the message, he said he could feel his walls being torn down. But he's like, I don't believe in this. And there's this moment at the end of an invitation to give your life to Jesus. And he's like, absolutely not. And then he just starts crying as he tells me about how at the end of the gathering, he doesn't know how, he doesn't know why, but he raised his hand to give his life to Jesus. And he's going, what do I do next? I didn't actually believe this, but now I do. And can you help me figure out what to do now? See, when I think about why I give, it's for that. See, there may be people in Los Angeles and across the world who are trying to make sense of life, and the only way they're going to actually connect to the God who loves them is because of what we're doing. So we believe that there's a stewardship that God has given us, and that there's people that may never find the life that they long for without the message that we get to bring together. And so I want you to know that your gifts and your offerings and your sacrifice, it always has someone's name on the other side of it. And this time, it had somebody's name on it who you may never have met, but man, I'm telling you, it changed their life forever. And so if you're here and you want to join with us and just creating space for God to do what only He can do, creating space for people to find hope and to find life and to find joy, then I want to invite you right now to join with us and to give generously and sacrificially. You can go to mosaic.org/give. You can also give through our app. Let's just declare that there will be no more generous community that believes in the power of people than us when we back it up, not just by our words, but by our actions. We're in the middle of this amazing series that Pastor Erwin has launched called The Genius of Jesus, and I cannot wait for this message. Last week was so incredible as he kicked off the series, and I believe this message is gonna set root in so many hearts and minds. And so I wanna encourage you to just lean in. I wanna just invite you to pray and ask that God would speak in a profound way, because this is a message that could literally transform your present and forever change your future. Let's lean in to the genius of Jesus.
I can do it myself. If you're a parent, you've heard that line. You've heard it from your kids. And in fact, your parents probably heard it from you. I can do it myself. There's something interesting about us as human beings, that as we grow and develop, we feel this desperate need to prove that we can do it ourselves, that we are capable of doing whatever we want to do without anyone else's help. And in a very unique way, this is a part of the developmental process of figuring out how to relate to power. Every one of us, whether we realize it or not, struggle with the reality of powerlessness. When we're little, we want to do things that bigger kids do. We want to do things that someone who's stronger, someone who's smarter, someone who's more developed can do. And there seems to be almost like this psychological tension with us that we're never satisfied with what we can do. We always want to do that little bit more. And so eventually, those parents that were helping us when we were little, now they're holding us back. They're not letting us do it for ourselves. They're trying to do it for us. I can do it myself. And I think this power dynamic that is actually part of all of our human journey. It's a part of our grappling with, well, not just our power, but our powerlessness, and not just our sense of powerlessness, but our attempt to become more powerful. And at the same time, we're trying to push off those forces around us that exert power on us. It's kind of odd when you think about it that your parents, the ones that are supposed to be for you, the ones that are trying to help you grow and develop, the ones that are providing for you and feeding you and putting clothes on your body, they're the ones you want to kind of push off because, well, now they're holding you back. And what sometimes we don't even realize is the very, very people who are helping us discover our power are the ones that we begin to perceive are in the way of us exerting our full power. What is it about us that we want to shake ourselves free from everything around us, shake ourselves free from the help of others, shake ourselves free from anything in the environment or the circumstances around us that might limit our power? Even before we actually even know how to use that power or handle that power. And in fact, a part of the challenge that all of us face as human beings is not just the tension of feeling powerless in relationship to other human beings or even to God, but what do we do when we feel powerful? It strikes me as so fascinating when you talk to people who feel powerless, and they have a much more ethical view of how power should be used than necessarily the same people once they have power. I'm from El Salvador. I was born in San Salvador, and I used to joke about how, well, Latin Americans only have two forms of government. It's revolution and dictatorship. And it seems like our history just keeps repeating itself, that The revolutionaries understand that power should not be abused, and so they fight for that power to rule. And those corrupt dictators that use their power to overpower, use their power to control, use their power for personal benefit are finally overthrown. And then finally we have great government, except that never happens. We always seem to find ourselves back where we were before. The revolutionaries become the dictators, and the dictators and their groups become the revolutionaries, and the cycle just goes on and on and on. Because it seems that as much as we thirst for power and long for power and understand the power of power, we never seem to be able to relate to power in such a way that we make the world better. One of the strokes of genius that Jesus actually brings to the world is the genius of power, how he teaches us to see power and how to relate to power and actually how to use power so that it becomes the power of good. In John chapter 18, beginning in verse 4, we see this interesting contrast of power, both in the life of Jesus and in the life of one of his particular disciples, Peter. It says, Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he said. And Judas, the traitor, was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Who do you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken will be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Well, we have to remember whenever we read the Gospels, whenever we're reading the historical narratives in the Scriptures, they're what would be described as charismatic. They're not just historical. They're actually communicating a very particular message. There's an intention behind not just the stories that were chosen, but the order in which those stories are told. And in fact, John tells us that if they were going to record everything that ever happened in the life of Jesus, they were going to record every story that they could tell about Jesus, there would not be enough books in the world to hold all of those stories of Jesus. I wish they had taken the time to write a few more books. But what we know then is that the four Gospels are not simply the historical record of everything Jesus ever did and said, that they were selected carefully so that we would understand who Jesus was and how he was engaging the world around him, the truth he was communicating and leaving for us. And so in this moment, we have two contrasting experiences. The religious leaders came to take Jesus away. This is right before they were going to carry him off and crucify him. And so there was this moment of violence, this moment of danger. That there was this moment where they could feel the tension in the room. And when they came to get Jesus, and he asked them, "Who are you here to get?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth." When Jesus says, "I am," it tells us, and it's such a subtle moment, when he spoke and they heard him, it says that they all fell back. And it shows us the subtlety of the authority and power that Jesus had even in that moment. It's almost as if the Scriptures lay out for us this one simple reminder. What was about to happen was not going to happen because Jesus was powerless. John and Luke and Matthew and Mark, they want us to understand that what's about to happen is not happening because Jesus was powerless, that he actually was powerful. And if we don't understand the genius of power, we'll miss what's happening in this moment. And so there's this incredible contrast. Jesus speaks, they all fall back. And then Peter takes a sword and he swings and he cuts off one of the priest's right ear. His name was Malchus. And I guess if you have your ear cut off, you deserve to be recorded in the Bible. And what strikes me as odd, first of all, is Peter was a fisherman. What in the world was he doing with a sword? And clearly he wasn't really that good with a sword, because the most likely thing Peter was trying to do was cut off the guy's head. I mean, he was not trying to be this nuance where he cut off a guy's ear and says, now if you take another step, I'll cut off the other ear. This is the ear. This is not a moment of the Prince's Bride. This is Peter swinging with anger, trying to exert his power, and he cuts off Malchus's ear, and Jesus picks it up and puts it back on, and Jesus tells him to put your sword away. You have this contrast of Jesus, who is all powerful and speaks and people fall back, but he doesn't use his power for his own personal benefit. And then we have Peter, who's actually powerless. He's actually motivated by fear and anger, and he takes a sword and he swings it. And I thought, this is such an interesting insight to the way most of us relate to power. We try to act powerful when we feel powerless. But when we're actually standing in our power, we never use that power to overpower. We use power to actually exert the most good, not simply to protect ourselves. How do you use power? What is the measure of your power in your life? When oftentimes when we talk about our relationship to power, it's usually when we feel powerless. And we can actually confuse things like humility as something that is a virtue, but it's actually powerlessness that looks like humility. And really you only understand virtues like humility when you're standing in your power. So you only understand the level of humility you have when you are confident and capable of exerting your power in the world around you. You can only understand a virtue like servanthood, because you can serve and never actually have the spirit, the posture of servanthood. You're just serving because you feel powerless. You don't have a choice. You're just doing what you're told. And so you can look like you have the posture of a servant, but really all you have is the position of a servant. But when you have power, when you're standing in your power and you choose to serve, now that service is actually being fueled by your power. It's an expression of your humility. It is an extension of your character. It's not simply the default mode because, well, you don't have a choice. In fact, recently, one of my friends who's incredibly powerful sent me a text about a decision he made, and he wrote, I didn't have a choice. And I responded, you always have a choice. It's one of the hard reminders when you're a person with power that you always have a choice. And I wonder how oftentimes we actually perceive ourselves to be powerless, but what we've actually done is we've relinquished our power. We've abdicated that power so that we could take on the posture of powerlessness, so that we can actually abdicate ourselves from all responsibility. Because the great thing about being powerless is that you're not responsible. But what if there's always power within you and you are always responsible to use that power for good? The disciples, the followers of Jesus, the people who walked and traveled with him, even those among the multitudes that listened to him teach, they had hoped that the Messiah, who they expected to come, they longed for his coming. You need to realize that the people of Israel had this narrative in their theology that one day the Messiah would come, that one day God would send that deliverer, one day he would come and set them free. And they had reconstructed this promise to believe that there would be born to them a king who would overthrow whatever empire was holding them captive. And of course it was the Romans. And so all they could hope for was that this Jesus of Nazareth would be this Messiah, this deliverer, this Savior, this king that would overthrow the Roman Empire and free them from this power and this tyranny. And then Jesus seemed to be indifferent to their circumstances. He seemed to be indifferent to their pain. He seemed to be indifferent to the tyranny that they were living under. And it's almost as if Jesus was trying to teach them how to live in a world where power was misused rather than to overthrow the powers that stole their freedom. I think that they're not very much different than us. I think that when we turn to God and when we invite Jesus to change our lives, what we really hope he does is that he fixes our circumstances. He changes our environment. He puts us in a new free world, into a different reality where everything works for us and we're now free to live and free to love and free to enjoy and free to experience life to the fullest. And then we become really angry with God, even embittered against God when God doesn't change our circumstances, when God doesn't change our environment, when God doesn't seem to understand that his job is to free us from the tyranny all around us. And all he's focusing on is freeing us from the tyranny within us. And he's using that power to change us from the inside out, not from the outside in. He's using his power to free us in our inner world, when we really just want him to free us from the problems of the outer world. Well, the Israelites who lived during the time of Jesus had to deal with real oppression, real bondage, real tyranny. They understood what it felt like to be powerless. And I cannot imagine the overwhelming disappointment that Jesus was to them, that he did not come to deliver them from the empire of the Romans. I think if Jesus had at least tried, he would have been far more popular. See, it wasn't the good that Jesus did that really created for him controversy. It was the good that they wanted him to do that he didn't do that really created the greatest level of disdain. See, they wanted Jesus to do the good of giving them freedom, of using his power to take the powerless and making them powerful. But then Jesus begins to teach them, no, I'm going to teach you how to reclaim your power when you feel powerless. In a real world, in a world filled with men who would use their power for evil and not for good. And so in Matthew chapter 5, beginning of verse 38, Jesus begins to teach them. And these teachings may seem almost metaphorical if you don't understand the context of the time in which Jesus spoke them. They were not simply metaphors for them. They were incredibly concrete and real. Jesus said, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And isn't it interesting that even thousands of years later, that adage is still here, an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. And I'm telling you, across the world, this is one of the central edicts of the use of power. And you see, even in the Middle East, the ongoing crisis and violence and conflicts. And it's almost as if this ideology of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth rules over an entire region of the world. But I tell you, Jesus says, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, then turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away the one who wants to borrow from you. And so Jesus uses 3 basic images that were incredibly relevant for that moment in time. He says, look, if someone slaps you on the cheek, then turn the other cheek. And you need to realize that these virile, strong, proud Hebrew men lived their lives feeling powerless, especially when Roman soldiers would come. And they understood that in any other circumstance, no one could get away with this. But what do you do when you're oppressed by an empire and you're outnumbered and outmanned and they hold all the weapons in their hands? And so there was a sense of powerlessness when a Roman would slap them on the cheek and slap them on the face and make them feel as if they're nothing but a Hebrew dog. And Jesus said, I'm going to give you a way to reclaim your power. When they slap your face, you give them the other cheek. You let them know that their abuse of power cannot change who you are in your essence. That they may have the power to control your environment, but they do not have the power to control your character. Just give them the other cheek. Oh, and by the way, if someone wants to take your coat, you give him your shirt too, because when it was cold, the Roman soldiers could literally command a Hebrew to give their coat up because they're cold and they want to take from them because they have the right to do so. And Jesus said, look, when they take from you and they use their power and abuse their power to take your coat, here, I'm going to teach you how to be free of this feeling of powerlessness. I want you to be more generous than what they can demand. I want you to give them your shirt too. And can you imagine what it was like? Would it be like if someone slapped you in the face thinking that they're abusing you and humiliating you and you're so powerful that you turn the other cheek? You're powerful enough not to retaliate in that moment. When they take your coat because they want to take advantage of their power and make you feel powerless. And then all of a sudden, after you give them your coat, wait a minute, I had this great shirt. I want to give you two. And then it says if they force you to carry their pack for 1 mile, because this is insane, but the Romans were allowed to take the pack off their horse to get their horse a rest, and they were allowed to force a Hebrew man to carry that pack for 1 mile. And they were not allowed to carry it more than 1 mile, but they were allowed to enforce that, to impose that on a Hebrew. And can you imagine after that 1 mile, I see that's the point of humiliation. Now you can walk back because you're powerless. But when that mile is over and that Roman soldier said, all right, you can go back, put the pack back on my horse. And you looked at him and said, no, it's okay, I'm good. Your horse is clearly more tired than I am. I'll carry it a 2nd mile. Jesus is reframing. He is turning our whole concept of power upside down. This is a stroke of genius. It's the genius of power. It's how to use your power and not allow anyone to make you powerless. Because while others may use their power for evil, no one can stop you from using your power for good. Now, I know this isn't popular and this isn't easy, and yet what Jesus taught us has transformed modern history. And this is why I think this particular chapter on the genius of power that we dive into in chapter 4 is so essential. Because if you want to look at a stroke of genius that has infiltrated the common thinking of the Western world, it's this one. I know a lot of people say, well, religion is what causes evil, and religion is the destruction of the world, and religion is what causes violence, and science, that's what's going to create a better world. Science is going to finally give us world peace. Science is finally going to elevate the human experience and make us truly, fully human again. But I want you to realize that it was science that gave us Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was science that created the volatility of modern history, that the world could destroy itself at any time. It was science that gave us mutually assured destruction. That the only reason that the world remains in some semblance of peace is that we know we could literally destroy each other and blow each other off the map. Now, I love science, but I want you to realize that science doesn't make humans better. It just makes humans better at what they would do when they're not at their best. See, it wasn't science that actually revolutionized the view of power. It was Jesus. See, what you need to realize is that the whole language you have today of things like social justice, of reparations, of political ethics, of ethics of power, the whole concept that a nation should care about what it did wrong in its history. I mean, even now, when we're looking backwards and we're removing statues and we're trying to really deal with a negative history, I want you to realize all of human history is imperfect. And it is overwhelmingly, when you're looking at the use of power, negative. But what we sometimes miss, though, is that the idea that you should actually feel bad for conquering another people is a radical shift in thinking that was created by the genius of Jesus. See, Genghis Khan didn't worry about reparations. He didn't think about all the villages he pillaged, all the men he killed, all the women he raped. You see, throughout history, empires didn't go back and reconsider the ethic of taking over the world. No one in the Greek Empire or the Roman Empire or the Egyptian Empire ever stepped back and thought to themselves, you know what, we really shouldn't have done that. And in fact, even when we look back and try to think through the whole dynamic of reparations, we kind of stop at least a domino away, because when you look at New Zealand trying to grapple with what the Kiwis did to the Maoris, but they never really grappled with what the Maoris did to the other tribes. And when you look at what happened in Australia with the Aussies and the Aboriginal peoples, and you never stop and ask the questions, well, how far back do we take this? You see, what is fascinating to me, even when you look in this nation, in the United States, and dealing with the indigenous peoples who were here, the Apache, the Navajo, the Cherokee, the Seminoles, all of the tribes that roamed this country before it was ever colonized by the Europeans and the British. You see, they had issues too. And I look at even some of my own genetic code, and I have Mayan blood in my system. I have Native American Indian blood in my DNA, and how some of our ancestors would cut open the chests of living people and sacrificing them to gods and pulling out their hearts while they were still alive. See, when you realize that the history of humans is pretty dark, filled with violence and conquest and the abuse of power. And history was written by the powerful, conquering, dominating, destroying the powerless. And that's not even an exception in Europe and in Great Britain. And you see the wars of the British with the Scottish and the Irish and the Welsh, and you see the abuse of so many people. And sometimes we think that, well, you know, it's the white people from Europe or the UK. They're the ones who are always using their power to overpower. But you have to realize that the common person in those parts of the world were also the victims of abuse and were never experiencing power used well. A history of kings and queens and conquerors is the history of humanity. So where did the conversation come from that we should actually care about how we use our power? I can tell you that 3,000 years ago, that was not really the topic of conversation about power. That Jesus shifted our understanding of power. And what to me strikes me as such an interesting historical anomaly is that the United States and Great Britain and Russia and Germany all go to war. All of Europe and all of Asia are at war. Japan and China in what has become known as World War II. And after the war was over, Germany was divided between Russia and the Allies. And we have a dramatically different future for East Germany and West Germany. East Germany experiences the oppressive hand of an atheistic communist ideology where they have to build a wall because everyone wants to escape East Germany to go to West Germany that has been conquered by the Allies and has been shaped now by the United States and by England and by this Christian worldview shaped by Jesus. And the same thing happens in Japan, except it's not divided. The United States becomes the principal influence over the conquered nation of Japan. And within decades, both Japan and Germany become two of the world's greatest economic powers because after they're conquered, they are not destroyed, but they are rebuilt. And there was a stewardship of responsibility that had never existed in human history. See, I think sometimes because we focus so much on everything negative that has ever happened because of Christianity and the modern world, and there are some really bad choices that have been made, like the Crusades, that we actually miss where the genius of Jesus and where the genius of power has radically altered the way that we view power and the responsibility of those with power. But we have to understand that the genius of power moves power from an opportunity to a responsibility. Power is not a privilege, but an obligation to make the world better. I was struck how in this moment where Jesus speaks and he says, I am, and they all fell back, he could have so easily used his power to change the narrative going forward. And in fact, when we think of Jesus and we think of his power, we don't think of the cross. We think of the resurrection. And so at the cross, we think of, well, Jesus' sacrifice. And at the resurrection, we think of, well, Jesus' power. And yet what we need to realize is that separation is actually improper. In Romans chapter 8, verses 10 and 11, Paul tells us this. But if Christ is in you, then even your body is subject to death because of sin. The Spirit gives life because of righteousness. And if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his Spirit who lives in you. I want you to realize that there's at least two layers here that are so critical to understanding power. That the same power that raised Jesus from the dead was the same power that drove Jesus to the cross. You see, we have this contrast. Oh, Jesus was powerless at the cross and powerful at the resurrection. Now, I want you to realize that Jesus had been given all authority and all power. That's what John tells us in John 13. That all authority and power had been restored to him. And so everything that happens going forward through the Lord's Supper, to the crucifixion, is Jesus using his power fully. See, everything that happened from Jesus putting a towel around his waist and washing his disciples' feet to allowing his hands to be crucified and nailed to a tree, this is the power of God fully exercised. The cross is not us watching God powerless. The cross is us watching God powerful. The resurrection was simply that power working its way through, because death could not conquer life, because hate could not conquer love, because despair could not conquer hope. And then he tells us that the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead dwells in us. And by the way, he uses the exact same narrative. You see, we want God's power in us, and we want to bypass the crucifixion and go right to the resurrection. So for our lives, so what we talk about is like, we have the power of God, so now I can live powerfully. But you see, if you're going to step into the power that Jesus brings to you, you have to be willing to take the journey that Jesus called you to. And there is no exercise of power that Jesus will ever empower in you that does not lead you to your own crucifixion. It's the power to live a life that is selfless, the power of living a life that is sacrificial. It's the power of living a life where you place others above yourselves. It's the power to die to yourself so that you might bring life to others. And the same power that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you right now if you've given your life to him. Which then, I guess, almost demands the question, then why do I feel so powerless? If all the power that dwells in Jesus and raised him from the dead lives in me, why do I live such a powerless life? I remember when Erwin was a little boy, I asked him to move something that weighed, I guess, maybe a couple 100 pounds. And he might have been 8, 9 years old or so. And And I said, hey, buddy, I want you to take this. I want you to move from here to there. And he tried and couldn't move it at all. And he goes, Dad, I can. I said, no, you can use anything that you think will help. You can use any resource that you need. I just want you to move this from here to there. And he tried and tried and tried to leverage it and tried to find ways to move it. And after a while, and he was pretty persistent, but he finally just gave up and he said, I can't move it. You're asking me to do something, I can't do it. I said, I told you to use whatever resource you have. Have you exhausted all of your resources? And he said, yes. And then after he finally felt so frustrated and dejected, I asked him a question. I said, hey, buddy, I told you to use all the resources available to you. Why didn't you ask me to move it? He goes, oh, I didn't know that was like a part of the rules. And I think that so oftentimes when God calls us to life that he created us to live, when he places within us a sense of destiny, when we finally get a sense of the calling that we have, when we finally know the journey that we're supposed to take, when we finally get a picture of the future we're supposed to create, when God finally begins to paint a dream of a life that we can actually experience, and then we can't get there. And we try and we try and we try, and we're frustrated. We think, well, God, you're the one that called me to do this. You're the one that told me to do this. You're the one that's giving me this passion, this drive, this longing. You're the one that's letting me see the possibility of this different me, this different world, this different life, this different future. And then, God, why can't I do it? And I think God then sits back and said, I told you to access all your resources. Why didn't you ask me? Why didn't you ask me? Oh, I guess it's because I can do it myself. Maybe that same mindset of when we're 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, we're trying to exert our power. And we're just trying to prove to everyone, I can do it myself. Maybe the next step in experiencing the genius of power in your life is to acknowledge your powerlessness, to live the life God created you to live by yourself. Maybe it's coming to that place where you finally just own your powerlessness and say, God, the person I long to become, the life I long to live, the future I long to create, the world I want to be a part of, I cannot create it by myself. I know for me, one of the things that so drove me to Jesus was I wanted to save the world. I cared about things. I wanted to end poverty, and I wanted to end suffering, and I wanted to make a difference on this in this planet. I wanted to bring at least in some small way an end to human suffering and pain and injustice. And the problem is I wanted to save the world, but I couldn't even save myself. I wanted to make the world better, but I couldn't even make me better. And it took a bit of a journey and some stumbling and falling and some pain and disappointment, some failure and frustration. I finally just turned to God and I said, I was wrong. I can't do this by myself. I need you. And maybe you're listening right now and you just feel so powerless. There's things you long to see happen in your life, changes you want to make in your life. There may be addictions you want to break or just things that are weighing you down that you need to be free from, and you've been trying to do it by yourself for so long. Maybe it's time just to stop and realize that God never wanted you to try to prove that you are the singular power in the universe that can accomplish all things by yourself, but that you are created to live in relationship to the God who is all-powerful. And the moment you realize, oh, when I accept that powerlessness, that's when I begin to step into his power. That's the genius of power. The moment you stop trying to prove that you're powerful enough. The moment you say, Jesus, I need your power to change me. So if you're listening right now and You've never crossed the line of faith. You've never trusted Jesus with your life. And maybe right now you're just exhausted and tired and frustrated. And maybe it's been a struggle to believe because it's so hard to relinquish power. But you know, the easiest thing in the world to realize is that you're not relinquishing power. You're relinquishing powerlessness and receiving the power that raised Jesus from the dead. And that power will bring you to freedom and to life. So right now, if you're ready to trust Jesus with your life, I'm going to invite you right now just to cross the line of faith by praying this simple prayer. It's not everything you and God need to talk about, but it's where it must begin. Right now, if you're ready to trust Jesus with your life, would you pray this prayer with me? Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just tell him, Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. If you just prayed this prayer, if you've just opened your life up to Jesus and given your life to him, I want you to know that Jesus has come to dwell within you. And the very power that raised him from the dead now dwells in you. And that is the genius of power.
Can we together, come on now, thank our pastor, Erwin McManus, for that incredible talk. What a beautiful reminder, and I can't wait to apply all of the beauty in this message this week. Today, if you made a decision to follow Jesus for the first time, if you crossed over that line of faith, we want to welcome you to the family first. We want to celebrate this choice with you, and we want to help you. So if that's you, and today you made a choice to follow Jesus, then I want you to text the word decided to 71711. And we're going to give you tools and resources. We're going to give you some practical steps on how you can now step into this new journey as you're walking with Christ. So right now, that's you. Text decided to 71711. And I can't wait to see what's coming next week. What an amazing day today we got to be a part of and continue this series. So I want to encourage you to invite friends, and we'll see you back here next week as we continue the genius of Jesus.
I call on you. You promise to show up each time that I do, so proof that it's true. I look at you, your beauty and kindness I cannot refuse. No, I can't refuse. I can't refuse. Walking with you through all of the years, I thought I was alone, but I was so wrong. Coming to you, you promise to be there each step that I take, so show me the way, show me the way. Show me the way. promise to show up each time that I do, so proof that it's true. I look at you, your beauty and kindness I cannot refuse. No, I can't refuse.